Okay, so we're going to start off with a new empty document. Within this document, I have gone and dragged and dropped just a little example video file, just so we have something to work with. So dragged and drop it in here. Okay, you can place it wherever you like. Now, the first thing we're going to do is change the background color of this file. I mean, this background color, really, you can use whatever you want. So we're going to click on this little resize canvas area button over here on the left. We click it and we get a series of buttons below the video window. We can resize our canvas, snap to front window, etc., etc. And this little button in the middle with this by default black color, we're going to click that, and we're just going to take the brightness all the way up just to make it white. We close down our colors palette, we apply it, and now we have a white background where our video is floating on top of. Okay, very well. Now, the next thing we're going to do is add a little text box underneath each one of our guests. So to do that, we go over to this right hand palette, and right here where we see a big old T, we click that T, and then all the way at the bottom we click on add text box, and then in our timeline this little text box appears. Now we click and drag the text box to wherever we would like it. What I tend to do is, depending on the format, for example, let's say I want to leave a little bit of space over here for our icon. Well, I would just place the text box right around there. Double click inside, you type in your text. So let's say you want a Twitter handle, so it's @SoyJimmy. If the text is too big, what we can do is click outside of the text box, click again to highlight the whole box, go over to our palette, and in sizes we have a few defaults here, but if we would want it bigger or smaller than what's there, click on font panel, a whole bunch of options come up, and here you can add more custom sizes, you can change your font face, you could do a lot of little things here. For now, we're just going to keep it at, let's say, what, 24 is a little bit too small. Let's try 36. Alright, 36 looks fine. I'm going to bring this little box down a little further. Now, what happens? Well, right here, we can put our little Twitter bird over here and our name right here. But in case you didn't want to put an icon, what I would suggest is you stretch out your text box all the way to the edges and center align your text. So once your text is center aligned, it'll be aligned with the center of your guest's window. Now, if you do this and then you put your little Twitter bird over here on the left, the problem is that the Twitter bird is going to be in some other area behind your guest. It won't all align perfectly, because if your guest has a Twitter handle that's longer or shorter or whatever, then the Twitter bird is going to get pushed around. So what I prefer, and it's just preference, it doesn't mean it's right or it's wrong, it's just what I prefer, is I stretch out my little Twitter handle, let's keep it right there, and that would be one text box. Now, let's bring in our little bird. So for that, I have two examples. Let's open both of these in Photoshop just so you can get an idea of what's going on. For example, an image that's a JPEG has a solid color background. So basically, this image has no transparent area. Okay? Now, if I were to place this image over a black background, let's go ahead and do that just for an example. I'm going to go back, change my background color. Now it's all black. You can't see the text because it's a white text. Well, let's go ahead and change that just to make this example as clear as possible. What you could see that I did is I went over to the text palette, right here where it says solid color, right before there's a little color chip. You click the color chip and you can change it. There's also other options for colors. Since we're just working with black and white right now, you can just use the brightness dial, or you can go over to the color wheel, and then there's even hexadecimal colors for people who want to use that. Then you have this icon where you could use RGB colors. Bunch of ways to work with color. So now that we have that, I'm gonna press. I'm just gonna drag and drop my JPEG image into my document. Whoop. Drag and drop it into the timeline. And what I like to do is I like to keep all my layers one on top of each other. So here, you click and drag, and if you start dragging down, it'll eventually add more layers. So that's how to do that. So click on the little Twitter bird, and to resize it, you just click on one of these handles. Now, if you just click without pressing Shift, it'll resize in whatever dimension you want. You can stretch it out. This is a problem. So what you want to do is just press Shift while you're dragging, so it scales down in proportion. Now, there's my little Twitter bird. Oh, but that looks horrible. Why? Because it has that white background. So ideally, what we want here is an image with a transparent background. So click on the bird, backspace to delete it, go back to Photoshop, and here we can see that a PNG has a transparent background. So basically this means is that all we're seeing here is the silhouette of the bird. And the way Photoshop works is it has this checkerboard to show us transparency. So I'm going to close both of these down, hide Photoshop, and drag and drop my bird, my PNG of this bird, and now what we can see is that this is starting to look much better because the little Twitter bird is completely outlined and transparent. That looks much better without that white background. So this is basically the difference between PNGs and JPEGs. That PNGs support transparency, JPEGs don't. In the case that you want to have, let's say, a colored background and graphics on top, ideally you would want either the same color background in your graphic as the background in your video so that they look like they're integrated, or you would want a graphic that has a transparent background just like this Twitter bird PNG. And you can find this graphic if you just go over to Google and type in Twitter logo PNG or Twitter logo transparent background, something like that, and you should then click over to images and you'll find a whole slew of things. So I am going to go back to white background because white background with black text and that little Twitter bird in its own color. There we go, black text, drag and drop. Now we can keep this little blue bird here. I keep forgetting that you have to drag and drop into the timeline, not into the document window. So, alright, so let's say this Twitter bird's here. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to reposition it in smaller increments. Okay. You might like this scale, you might not. For example's sake, we're just going to leave it as is. Now, the next thing we can do is now we need to take this stuff that we've laid out here and copy it over to our guest. So I click outside of the document just so nothing's selected, and then I click on one item, and then I shift click on the next item. Oh, sorry, Command Shift click. On the PC, I would imagine it's Control Shift click, and basically what that's going to do is it's going to highlight and select more than one element at a time. So in this case, I'm going to unclick. I've clicked on the Twitter bird. In Mac, Command Shift, and PC, Control Shift plus click on the next element, and you select two items at once. Now, what we can do is Command C to copy, Control C on PC, Command C, Control V on Mac and just basically duplicate these layers, drag and reposition, change the information, and there we would have our elements under our guest. Now, here's another thing we need to do. We can select. Let's delete this. Delete that. Delete that. And what we're going to do now is select these two elements, which I can also do on the timeline. I click and shift click. In the timeline, you can shift click to just shift click in to select multiple items that are in a sequence. But let's say that I wanted to select the video and just the Twitter bird. If I shift click, it's going to select everything within those two elements. So what we would do is command shift click, command click on the timeline to select multiple items. So PC you would control click, Mac it's just control click. So I select one and I press command on Mac to click on another element to select multiples. So I select multiple elements, and now I'm going to group them by going into edit and group. So basically now these two elements, why aren't they not? Now these two elements are in a group. As you can see, when I click on one, both of them are selected. Now, another thing I could do is I can nest these clips. So right now what we're seeing is once I click on one of them, they're both selected. Now that's a group. But what happens is that in our timeline, they're occupying double the space. So we see that there is space. There's two elements occupying two layers. So we can nest these, and basically we have one clip that the only real advantage is that it just makes it clutter. It's less clutter in the timeline. So this is one advantage. The next advantage is I'm going to undo that just so you know that you could also nest elements. Another thing that we can do is, since these are both selected, let's say I wanted to put in a little incoming animation. I'm going to drag and drop my little bar here. If you hover your mouse right in between the seconds, what would that be called? I don't know. The seconds timeline. There's a little black line that if you hover your mouse, you get these little double arrows. You click and drag, it'll resize and rescale your layers. So selected. Let's say I wanted this to start out and fly in. Okay, now the way we have to do this is our little time scrubber here needs to be at the starting point. So there's my starting point. It's over here now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this down just so it's outside of my work area. Anything outside of the work area is not visible within the video. So it's starting outside. Now, if I move my scrubber, nothing happens. Now let's say I wanted it to fly in by now. Okay. So what I would do now is add a video action. And that is over here on our right hand side, there's a little video icon. Press that. And what I would do is select these two elements, since they're grouped, select them, add a video action, which would add a video action to both of them. Now, as you can see, our video action is being placed at the time scrubber before, not after. So that means that our animation ends exactly in the position where the time scrubber is now. So what I want to do is I want my animation to end here. And if I go back, I can see that where the time scrubber is now is at the end of our at the beginning of our animation. And and I press play, and that has just moved in. So let's see that again. Press play and it moves in. Great. Now if you wanted to say fade this, what we would have to do is, we have an animation now that is floating in, and now let's say I wanted to make an animation that let's make this just a little bigger just so we see this. You can click and press this little knob here to zoom in and out of your timeline. So let's say I wanted this to start and fade color in. Same thing. We put our scrubber at the beginning of our animation, and let's say we just drop down our opacity. Okay? Drop down our opacity to 0. That means that when I press play now, as you can see, the animation becomes from transparent all the way to 100% opacity. So 0% is transparent, 100% is completely visible. Now, let's say that you wanted your animation to start a little before. Simple. Select it. You see these little handles that appear once you hover over the edge of the video action. You click and drag it out. Okay? Click and drag. That's going to make it longer from the beginning to the end point. And the same thing, vice versa. If you wanted to stretch it out after your end point, you click and drag. So let's check this out again. As you can see, it's taking a lot more time now to float in because the animation has been dragged out more towards the beginning. So as to where before it was short in time, moved in really quick, when I click and drag, it's going to move in a lot slower because now it's just taking more time. If you wanted to move your animation from position, you could just click and drag and move both of these pieces. Since, I remind you, since these elements are grouped, they're going to move in conjunction. They're locked together. So, now that I have that there, I am going to, let's say, make this small again. I am going to, now I'm ready to duplicate this over to my guest side. So, copy, paste, and what tends to happen is that Screenflow, when it pastes this, it doesn't paste it exactly in the beginning. So what we're going to do is just shove it over, drag and drop, so both of our animations are starting at the same spot. And this, let's say, is our guest. So what I would want to do here is that my end point is here. So I want it to end right there. And let's see. Now, as you can see that, yeah, my end point is there, but my starting point is still where the other one was. And when I click and drag, I see that my animation is flying from the left-hand side of the screen to the right-hand side of the screen. That's not what I want. So what do we have to do now? We have to change our starting point. So our starting point is here, and we have to drag and drop our starting point to about there. And now both of our animations are going to come up from underneath the guest from underneath the guest. Now we have that there. Oh, but what happens here? Our animation, our video keeps going, but our little graphics disappear. Well, that's simple. All we have to do, I'm going to make this smaller so you can see the timeline. All we have to do is select all of our little graphical elements and drag them by hovering our little cursor on the right hand edge of these elements, drag them over to the end point of our video. as you can see, it's going to snap. Once you get really close to the endpoint, it'll snap. So now our elements have a duration of all throughout our video. Now, if any moment in the video you wanted to make these elements disappear to introduce other elements or whatever, what we can do now is, let's say right here, I wanted these elements to disappear. Well, what I would do is add another video action. So I put my scrubber all the way to the end. This time all the way to the end, add a video action, and let's say my ending action is I wanted this element to fly out all the way over here. Let's make this video smaller so we can see it. So my video element's ending up here, and I want it to drop down in opacity, and the same to the other one. Add another video action, drag and drop where I want it to end, knock down its opacity. Now, when I go look at, this is the starting point, and our ending point is what we just did. So if I press play, let me go back a little bit further in time. So if I press play, you're going to see that the little elements disappear. Let's say that I'm undoing all this. Let's say I just wanted them to fade out. Well, simple. Instead of moving our elements, I'm going to add the video action and just drop their opacity down. Just drop it down. What happens here? They just fade out. If I wanted them to have a longer duration, I select them all, drag and drop, just drag, and as we can see that they start fading out slowly. Now, this is some really basic stuff to get some graphics on your side. The video, the same thing. You can apply video actions to video elements. In this case, I have both of these videos as one group already. So, but if they were individuals, I can control their sizes individually by doing the same thing. Let's say at this point in time, I wanted the video to get smaller. So I add a video action. This is the ending size. And let's say I wanted to scale it down. So this is what would happen. It scales down. Let's say at this point I wanted to move the video towards the right. So I could add another video action. Let's say I wanted it to take a little longer. So drag and drop the video action. Just drag, sorry, not drop. And I select the video and I just drag it to the right. And let's say I wanted to also make it bigger at the same time. Well, I could click, shift click, and proportionally drag it. And then let's say I wanted to add another video action where I reset everything. So what I could do is go back to scale and introduce 100% manually, and then drag and drop this video all the way back to the center. And now let's see what all these little video actions do. As we can see, this is how we can manipulate video through video actions. There's a bunch more stuff that you can do, but this is just some basic stuff on how to get graphics coming in and out of your videos and how to resize your video. So basically that's it. I hope this has been helpful. Yeah, so if you have any questions, comments, or whatever, just leave it in the comments, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.